And he was the first fruits offering, and he presented himself to the Father Yahuwah as the first fruits of many on that day. So he does these things at appointed times. Not only that, but he was literally in the grave during the time of unleavened bread. If you would remember, Shaul in the book of Corinthians tells us, let us keep the feast of Passover, not with the leaven of malice or wickedness, but that we should put that out of ourselves. And he tells us basically that leaven is a picture of sin. And Yahushua always tells his Talmudim, his taught ones, to beware the leaven of the Pharisees. So we know that the leaven represents sin, and him being put into the grave shows how he took the sin to Sheol, my friends. He put it upon himself, and then he went into the grave. But then he defeats the grave by raising on Yahuwah's Sabbath day, on the Feast of First Fruits, presenting himself as a sheaf wave offering, as the high priest at the right hand of Yahuwah. So we see how he fulfills these things, but not only this, but we see also that his Talmudim, his taught ones, his apostles, know the appointed times also, because they know that they are supposed to be at the set-apart place on the day of Pentecost, which is called Shavuot in Hebrew. So we see that they are there, they are in one accord and worship, and the tongues of fire descend upon them, and they are filled with the Ruach HaKodesh. So we see that the appointed times are important. There are appointed times for us to know when to meet with Yahuwah and what Yahuwah is doing in the earth. If you look at history, you see that on Yom Kippur's, for instance, if you go back through history, you'll see that some major disasters take place on the day of Yom Kippur. Yahuwah works and operates not according to pagan reckonings of time. For instance, people are talking about 2012, December 2012, and they're saying, oh, it's going to be a new age. Well, it may be an imposed new age by the governing systems around us, but Yahuwah is not moved by pagan reckoning of time. For instance, when 7707 came along, some people are saying, oh, the rapture might take place. My friends, Yahuwah does not care about the false pope or unholy father's pagan reckoning of time, the Gregorian calendar. He just simply doesn't. He pays attention to how he put everything into motion. So this is the reason we keep up with appointed times. Now, can we keep all the feasts exactly the way the Torah tells us? No, we can't, because we have to be in Yerushalayim. And also, we need our Mashiach to guide us and to lead us and to instate these things, because he will instate the Torah, for the prophet has said of old that the Torah shall go forth from Mount Zion. And also, Zechariah, the prophet, tells us that when Yahushua comes, that the Feast of Sukkot will not be optional. You will have to keep the Feast of Sukkot, and if you do not keep the Feast of Sukkot, it will not rain in your land. So, it will be mandatory. Look it up for yourself. It's very important that you understand these things. In Isaiah 66, Yeshayahu 66, we know that the Sabbath day will be implemented when the new heavens and new earth are created according to Yahuwah's own word. So we know that these things take place, so we keep up with them so that we can keep up with what Yahuwah is doing in the earth. Because I'm telling you, my friends, we see that Yahushua fulfilled the first 4 of the feasts in perfect order, but he also fulfilled some of the layers of Sukkot, being born, tabernacling among us. But the Feast of Sukkot, which is the Feast of Tabernacles, will be fully implemented later in the kingdom, when Yahushua ushers in New Yerushalayim and Yahuwah tabernacles with man. So we see that there are so many different fulfillments. So we keep these things the best that we can, because for one thing, Yahuwah said that it is a rehearsal. A convocation is a rehearsal, and is an everlasting one. It is one that does not end. He has not put an end to it. He said in Yeshayahu that the feasts and the new moons were a stink to him because he could not handle unrighteousness in assembly. So we simply don't assemble with unrighteous peoples during these times. But is it wrong to know when Yahuwah's feast days are? Absolutely not. I recommend you know when his times are. Now, how you keep those things, you have to pray, you have to seek Yahuwah on those things, because we are in the diaspora right now. We're dispersed in the world, and soon the true children of Yisrael, along with the strangers and the foreigners, shall become Yisrael in the kingdom, and they will worship Yahuwah the way that he prescribes. But until then, it is very important that we know this, because we see if he did those things in order. And we know that in Daniel chapter 9, Yahuwah says that Mashiach will be cut off in the midst of a week. There are 7 feast days in Leviticus 23. Now there are extra feast days that have been added in by tradition, etc., etc. But there are 7 major feast days. And Yahushua fulfilled the very first 4 of them with his death, Passover, his being in the grave, unleavened bread, his raising and presenting himself before Yahuwah on the Feast of First Fruits, and then the Ruach HaKodesh coming upon his taught ones on the day of Shavuot, which is called Pentecost. Now he's cut off in the midst of that, and he is not coming back to earth until the fullness of time, according to the word of Yahuwah. So what is the next 3 feasts in order? Well, the next 3 feasts in order after Shavuot or Pentecost are Yom Teruah, which is the day of trumpet blast or sounding of the shofar, or shouting also, which is what we're talking about right now. Then a few days later will be Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, which is the day that the books are open and that the righteous will be judged in the first resurrection. And then days after that, we have the Feast of Tabernacles, which is also called the Wedding Feast, which is a time of great celebration, of tabernacling with your mighty one, as it's a picture of, and letting the word of Yahuwah tabernacle in your heart, and all these various things. So they're very important, but it's important to see that in the next 3 fulfillments that Yahushua must do, the first thing he must do is sound the great, he doesn't have to sound the great shofar, but in his coming, the great shofar must sound, he must return, and we see that scriptural. And then not only that, we see judgment must happen sometime after that, a few days after that. And then we see that the kingdom will be instated on a Sukkot. And eventually, the new Yerushalayim will make its tabernacle among us on this day. And why do I say on this day? Well, it just makes sense, because this is the way that Yahuwah operates. Again, he operates according to his own reckoning of time, and he has fulfillments to these feasts. Even the book of Colossians chapter 2 tells us that these things are shadow pictures of good things to come. Okay, so let's look at Joel chapter 2. Just to give us one more example of sounding the great shofar when it is tied into the day of Yahuwah, which is at hand. Because, my friends, we need to understand that the day of Yahuwah is a day of darkness, a day of fire, a day of great woe unto those who have been practicing iniquity or lawlessness. Yael, or Joel, chapter 2, verse 1, says, "Blow you the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in the holy or Kadosh mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahuwah comes, for it is nigh at hand. A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, and the morning spread among the mountains, a great people and a strong. There have not been ever like it, neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations." And we know in the book of Malachi, Yahuwah tells us there's a day that's coming that burns like an oven. We know that the scripture tells us over and over and over that the day of Yahuwah is going to burn like an oven. When Yahuchanan, or John, in the book of Revelation, when it says he was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, it was Yahuwah's day, the great and terrible day of Yahuwah, and we clearly see that because everything he sees is apocalyptic in nature, and it is referring to the time of Yahuwah. This is not talking about the Sunday Sabbath, because again, the word first day of the week never appears within the Greek New Testament. It is a fabrication and a lie in all the translations, unfortunately. So, with that thought, let's go to 1 Thessalonians, because there are those who still think that we should not know when the set-apart times are. Again, I believe that we should be keeping these the best that we can. Is this something that we need to begin with for salvation? No. The operation for salvation in Acts chapter 15, we're told that we should stop eating those things strangled, we should stop eating those things with the blood, we should stop fornications and stop idol worship. And then they say, for Moses of old times has in every synagogue those who preach him on the Sabbath day, indicating that we should learn the books of Moses. So this is a process of discovery, and as you discover how influential Yahuwah's times are with Yahushua's ministry, you will see that it's important, my friends, because Yahuwah indeed has great movements of his spirit upon his feast days, upon his set apart times. When he said, I will meet with you, because he said, I will meet with you on these times.